We're so excited to get started with you all, and I encourage you to grab a coffee, a tea, or water, whatever you need to feel settled as we continue to wait for folks to trickle in. But we are going to go ahead and get started. And so I just want to thank you all for joining us for this really wonderful and important conversation today. We're so grateful that so many of you decided to participate in this event. My name is Thomas Godwin. My pronouns are they and them, and I work with SAGE, a national organization that provides services and advocacy for LGBTQ plus older adults across the country. I will be the event MC today, and I can't wait to get started. If you need closed captioning for this event, we will be providing both English and Spanish captioning. To turn on your English captions, please click on the closed caption or live transcript button at the bottom of your Zoom window. For Spanish captions, you can visit the link that we will provide in the chat. If you're having technical difficulties, please try logging out of the Zoom call and then logging back in. If you are still having technical difficulties after trying that, feel free to type in the chat what's going on, and we will try to support. I'd like to thank our colleagues at AI Media for helping us to provide Spanish closed captions for this event, and thank our colleagues at Interpret That for providing ASL interpretation for this event. As a participant at this event, you will be able to message in the chat, and I encourage you to put questions in the chat to introduce yourself. I see folks already introducing themselves in the chat, so this is great. We will do our best to monitor the chat and answer your questions as they come up. Please note that this event will be recorded, and the recording of this event will be posted on our YouTube channel and can be shared publicly with colleagues or friends in the future. So I'm going to briefly go through our agenda on this slide here for today. We're starting with this brief introduction, but we will quickly go into the community panel today. This panel will allow us to hear from local LGBTQ plus older adults in New Orleans. And this panel is the heart of our work. It's the voices of these members in the community who will center us in this important conversation today. And after hearing from the folks on this panel, we will get to hear from local organizations that are developing housing initiatives for LGBTQ plus older adults in New Orleans. We're very excited to hear about how these initiatives are working to address the housing insecurity issues in our LGBTQ plus older adult community. After we hear about these exciting projects, we will be taking a short break. And then after our break, we will finish our event today by hearing from a panel of local community advocates. These advocates are all trying to increase access to affordable housing, and this conversation will help us to brainstorm ways to support LGBTQ plus older adults who need affordable housing in New Orleans. So before we dive into our exciting agenda today, I'd like to take a brief moment to thank our event planning partners, TuttleCo. TuttleCo has been a longstanding partner of SAGE, and to our friends at TuttleCo, we appreciate your flexibility, your persistent advocacy, and your proficiency in this event planning work. Thank you all so much. We also want to thank our local organizational partners in New Orleans, No Age and A Home Among Friends. These partners helped us get this event off the ground, and we are so incredibly grateful for their support and their continued advocacy for this community. During the break, we will be showing a video with some information on how to donate to these organizations, so please be on the lookout if you would like to support their work. And lastly, I'd also like to thank our generous sponsors of the event, the Harry and Jeanette Weinberg Foundation. Without your persistent support, much of our work would be impossible, so thank you so much. Okay, so we are just going to dive right into this wonderful agenda today. And I'm so excited for this first panel. These community members are active members of the LGBTQ plus community in New Orleans. They have been community advocates and deeply resilient in the face of adversity. We are honored and thankful to get to hear from them today. I will start off by introducing each of our panelists, and then they will come onto the screen for our conversation. So panelists, as a reminder, as I introduce you, as you hear your name, you can turn on your camera. And once we start the conversation, make sure to come off mute as well. I will be introducing each panelist with an abbreviated version of their bio for the sake of time today, but all panelists' full bios can be found on our event website if you would like to know more about them. So our first panelist today is Kyra Kincaid, who uses she and her pronouns. Kyra is a dedicated professional with over 18 years of experience in the field of HIV. Her passion for making a difference in the lives of those affected by HIV has driven her work tirelessly within the community. Thank you so much for being here today, Kyra. Our second panelist is Wayne Sizemore, who uses he and him pronouns. Wayne is a visual artist, a performer, and an activist. His current points of concern are building a personal friend base, building LGBTQ+ elder support, encouraging considerate political conversation, and keeping his bills paid. He enjoys breaking into song unexpectedly, caring for his plants, wining and dining with friends, and going to sleep on crisp, clean sheets. I also enjoy many of those things, Wayne, but we are so glad you're here to join us today, Wayne. Our third panelist today is Sally Jackson, who uses she and her pronouns. Sally Jackson is a strong advocate for social justice and diversity. As a member of PFLAG, Sally supports this community organization, and she also reaches a wide audience through the radio program Expanding the Rainbow on WHIV-FM, a community radio station. She is an accomplished public speaker, interviewer, author, and observer of life. She enjoys travel, music, and photography. Welcome to this panel, Sally. Our fourth and final panelist today is Terrell Lynn Fox, who uses she and her pronouns. Terrell Lynn is a native of New Orleans. She received a bachelor's degree in speech education from the University of New Orleans. She is a former member of Sage New Orleans, a CAB member of T-Share, and a member of the First Emmanuel Baptist Church. Terrell Lynn Fox plays an active role within the community for various causes. We are so excited to have you here, Terrell Lynn. So we are just going to go ahead and dive right into this panel conversation today. Panelists, we are just so excited that you are here, and I'm very, very much looking forward to our conversation. We will be having an audience Q&A session after the panel, so audience, feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and we'll try to respond to those once we get to our Q&A session. So panelists, we're going to start by hearing from each of you individually about who you are. For starters, could you please introduce yourself and share with us about who you are and what brings you here today? And we're going to hear from each of you on this question. So Kyra, why don't you start us out today, if you don't mind?
Hello, everybody. My name is Kyra Kincaid. I've been working in the community since the turn of the century, and since then, I've started. Things have changed. The way my body operates, the way my brain operates, and just different things. It's more of a challenge than it was for me back then. Than it has recently become to be. So when I first got back here to New Orleans, and I was doing some research and reading some of the articles that have previously written by trans women. One of the panelists that's on here today, it was actually written by the fabulous Miss Terrell Lynn Fox, and when I read it, it got me to thinking and realizing exactly how things were looking for me, as I hate the word aging. I hate it, and I had this conversation with Sarah Lynn, and she was like, "We are evolving, we are not aging." You know, and I much prefer. Thank you for that outlook, Tara Lynn. That helps me to go through some of the things that I'm going through at the moment. Because you know, not too long ago, just about a week or two ago, found myself in the hospital. You know, and it's real, you know, and it makes you wonder how you're going to get through these moments if you don't have you know, things that you need lined up. And sadly enough, for the members of the LGBTQ community, a lot of us do not have those people that we can depend upon. You know, a lot of times we don't have organizations that we can depend upon. I don't know that they exist. So this was one of the main reasons that, you know, I found this something very important that, you know, I needed to become a part of. And that if it wasn't there, then let's create it while we still can. So that's why I'm in this fight right here.
Thank you so much, Kyra. It's such a pleasure to have you here. I'm so grateful for your presence here. And since you mentioned her, let's go to Tara Lynn next, if you don't mind going next, Tara Lynn.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tara Lynn Fox. My pronouns are she, her, hers. What brings me to this is that for so many years, I lived a sheltered life during my transition. In living that sheltered life, I was not aware of some of the issues that my trans community and my LGBT sisters and brothers were facing because of that sheltered life that I lived. And it wasn't until the issues about the bathroom issue, which oh my God, I'm sorry, which restroom should trans use and all that kind of stuff. I didn't have those types of obstacles to face when I transitioned. And when I saw that, I said, oh my God, I need to find some way to join in this fight. Then after that, my trans sisters of color started to be killed. And they were being labeled as they were out there as sex workers doing this and all that. And I said, my God, that could be me. And I have not been a sex worker since 1985. So I said, what can I do to join in the fight to show support for these young trans people? So I found T-Share. And thanks to Kyra and Jasmine White, they introduced me to the group. And so many resources now are available. So when it comes down to the aging process, as I find evolving process, sometimes I slip, I find myself like questioning, where do I go? Who do I have to help me to navigate through this process? And actually there was no one. So I was contacted by Michael Hickerson, and he introduced me to Sage New Orleans. And we started the group, and we started to the website, we started our Facebook page. Then COVID hit. I have no idea what happened to Sage New Orleans. So all my contact of possibly finding persons dealing with issues that I'm dealing with, accepting the evolving process and dealing with these different issues. That's why I'm here at the table, because it's going to be a new experience for me as well.
Thank you so much, Tara Lynn. Again, we're just so glad to have you here, and your experience in this community in New Orleans specifically is just so valuable to our conversation. So thank you. Why don't we go to Wayne next? Wayne, if you don't mind hopping in. Wayne, I believe you are on mute, so if you could just unmute yourself.
Did we lose him?
I think we're dealing with some tech difficulties right now. Oh, there it goes. Yep, you're good, Wayne. Yep, we got you.
Sorry. Okay. I'm 73. I came out when I was 23 in Atlanta and Columbus, Georgia. I was married at the time. I'd been married for 2 years. So I came out and started living as a gay person for these 50 years. Let's see. I'm an artist of a lot of stuff between performance, theater, and visual art, all kinds of visual art. Been productive for these 50 years doing those kinds of things. The last major things that I've done professionally are the Fringe Festival that was here in New Orleans through about 2015. I did a lot of visual work for them. And let's see, the Earth Day Festival also did a lot of stuff for them. But the last few years, I've really been spending time growing older and dealing with the things that I've had to deal with growing older, because I've really found that it is very much a full-time job just to take care of myself now. People say, oh, well, you don't have anything to do. Well, yes, if I want to stay alive, I have a lot I have to do. So I've been busy with that stuff. Let's see. And I've also found voice with No Age here. Very glad when I connected with them about 4 years ago, I guess. And really helped me through the pandemic because we did Zoom meetings, and that connection really curbed my feeling of isolation, which was very heavy. And it's helped to curb my feelings of isolation since that. I have several friends that I've made through No Age, and it provides No Age provides with a lot of activities too. So I've been very happy about that. Let's see, was there anything else? Yeah. Oh, I love being with my friends. I love eating food. I love drinking alcohol. I love gardening, and I love singing.
Thank you so much, Wayne. We're so glad you're here. And I did just want to name something that Wayne said, and also something that our colleague Jim Meadows put in the chat, is that what used to be Sage New Orleans, which Tara Lynn mentioned, is back to just being called No Age as an organization. They were one of our colleagues who helped us plan this event, and Jim Meadows is working with them. And as Wayne mentioned, No Age does incredible work for the community and supporting LGBTQ plus older adults in New Orleans. And so just wanted to offer some clarity there. And thank you, Jim, for putting that in the chat.
And just I'd like to say for people who may not be seeing this in the chat, that No Age is for New Orleans Advocates for Gay Elders.
Yes. Yep. Thank you, Wayne.
For some
all right,
reason, I'm not hearing you coming through. I'm not hearing. I don't.
Can you hear us okay, Tara Lynn?
No, barely.
Okay, well, why don't we have Sally? Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and Tara Lynn, we will try to troubleshoot what's going on with your audio while Sally is introducing herself.
Okay.
Sally, if you want to go ahead and take the floor.
Okay. Well, I'm just approaching middle age if I plan on living to be 144, but I'm always very serious. I started my life and transition and everything in Fort Worth, Texas, which is not a very welcoming place for gay anything at the time I was there. They didn't want to know about any of the letters of LGBTQ. So I found a therapist in Dallas, which is 50 miles from my house, to go see a therapist to start my transition. And she suggested I go on to a website for a social thing, since there was nothing in Fort Worth. It was called Laura's Playground. It's changed and gone away into something else now. But I went there for a place to feel like myself and where I could talk to people. And this is why I refer to myself as the accidental activist. because I went there for help and I ended up becoming a moderator, and I was hearing all of these stories from everybody else who was having much worse time than I was. And one of our duties on it was we did suicide prevention for trans people. And so we took suicide prevention classes and everything else. And through that, I met some people that told me, you're not in a good place to transition. And one of them invited me to move down to New Orleans. And we started off as roommates, and she was later became one of the founding members of Louisiana Trans Advocates. So we all became activists by accident. But if we listed all of the careers I had along the way, I'm very stable. I worked in 9 different things that would be called professions. And but my favorites are as a trumpet player, musician, I'm an educator. That was what my degree was in. And now I'm a talk show host and an author, and anything else that anybody needs along the way that I can still do. Carpentry's out because my knees are gone. So
Awesome. Thank you, Sally. We're so glad you're here as well. And I believe that Terrell-Lynn has logged off the call to log back in order to fix her audio. So we are just going to go ahead and get started. And when Terrell-Lynn comes back in, she will be able to hop into this panel conversation. But thank you all so much for being here. We're just so excited. It's so wonderful to be around folks who have had such an impact on the community as a whole. And so as we are talking today about housing needs and access for housing for LGBTQ plus older adults in New Orleans, what are some of the housing needs and challenges that you see in your community today? And I'm going to open this question up to all the panelists so we can just have a conversation together. But the floor is y'all's for that question.
God, where do we start?
Yeah.
There's so many needs for people, period, regardless of their age here in the New Orleans area. But when you get older, the concern for your safety and well-being and appropriate like bathrooms, you have to think about falls and slips and how you're going to get up. Is someone going to hear you? How long are you going to be stuck there? Are you going to die there? We don't like to think about those things, but they become real. And if you don't plan for those things, or somebody else have, the fortitude to think about those things and have them there for people who will need them one day. Right now I don't have grab bars in my shower, but that's gonna have to change quickly.
Well, on that particular note, a lot of the things that are done for I live in a subsidized housing because cost is one of the biggest things when you're living in New Orleans. I am living in a small studio apartment. This is pretty much the whole thing that you're seeing. And I'm paying a third of my Social Security check to live here, which is less than a third of what an apartment I was in before from about the same size was costing me. So if you're looking at that difference, it was almost the same as my Social Security check for the rent. So if I had stayed there, I couldn't get food, I couldn't do anything else. So I'm in the assisted living for subsidized living for elderly. The problem is that they are designed, and I wish I was on that panel, they're designed for efficiency and to be inexpensive. They try to be geared for us, but like The shower in my apartment is in a tub, standard step over the rim into the tub. And the grab bars are both on the far wall. So getting back out of the tub is a trick. And of
Becomes
course,
an issue.
yeah. So one of the things that makes it difficult, and also holding down costs, you don't have dishwashers in your apartment. And that means standing for prolonged periods, which is not easy for a lot of elderly people who have balance issues. So little things like that that are done, I understand to lower cost, but it's something they need to think about if it's really that great of an idea to lower the cost those ways. But the main thing is you have a place that's affordable, you have a place that is secure. This place has security on the premises 24 hours a day, so you don't worry about that. We have pull chains placed a couple of places in the apartment. If you're lucky enough to fall near one of them, you can get help almost immediately. But they're not the places I worry about falling. So, but you have that feeling of security. The only problem is a lot of places aren't as accepting of having trans people and gay people in their facilities. I'm pretty lucky with that, but I have better than average hearing for someone in their 70s. And sometimes after somebody's going around the corner, after having been terribly pleasant, I hear them talking to their friends about, what was that? Was that a guy? Was that a girl? But I feel better when the other one says, I don't know, they're always pleasant. So, I get by that way. I live from the words of the great Elwood P. Dowd from Harvey. You can get through life by being terribly clever or terribly pleasant. And it's so much easier to be terribly pleasant.
I could speak up now. I agree with the things that both Kyra and Sally have already mentioned. I have notes to myself about those things. Also, something that I need is I need light. I need natural light coming in. So I need, I really love plants. And if I'm to have any plants, they also need natural light. So that's something I very much look for. Of course, things like good condition of heating and air conditioning, not many steps to have to go up to get to my place. Right now, I'm on a ground level. And while that's a godsend in many ways, I'm also in a place where it doesn't flood much, but the possibility of flooding is here, and I'm on sidewalk level. So there have been a couple of times in the past 5 years that the rain water has built up to just at the top of my door sill. So I've been lucky that no water has come in during the time that I've been here, but it's obvious that it could happen very easily. So that's a concern that I have. Transportation, access to things. So if the neighborhood doesn't have any of the things that are needed, then access to those is an issue for me. I don't have a car. I travel on a bicycle when I can. Very glad to do that. It helps to keep me healthy, but it also is quite limited, as you can understand, to get to things, especially doctor appointments and things that, it's raining and I come in soaking wet to go to a doctor appointment. Not good. Internet connection and phone connections and travel waves. It's like where I am now. It's very iffy. I pay for connections, but I'm in a section where there's difficulty with that with connection a lot of times. So that's very important. Accepting of pets in a place. Case, for working out things, case manager access. I'm HIV, so I've been in positions where I've had been able to access case managers at times, but right now I have a great difficulty accessing a case manager for things. And even when I do have case manager help, it's like I already have to know a great deal about what I need in order to be able to access anything. I can't depend on somebody else to be observing my situation enough to be able to help me with things. So I think a good case manager is something across the board that elderly people could use access to. Yeah, I think that covers most everything. You know, oh yeah, some access to the outside, some access to where there's like a courtyard or some kind of yard space, something. It would be ideal for me to have some space where I could actually work my hands in the dirt somewhere, because that's been a great deal of what I've done with my life is working in the dirt. So I would really hate to give that up. I have that where I am now only because I've created it myself with potted plants. I don't have any actual dirt, but I've offered my help to neighbors in their yards doing things so that I could have that sort of connection. I think I can stop there.
That was a lot, Wayne. Thank you. Thank you, seriously.
That's one thing.
So what did I miss? What did I miss?
Hey, Terrell-Lynn, welcome back.
Thank you. I don't know what happened.
No, we're so glad you're back. We were just discussing what some of the housing needs and challenges for the community are today. And what I'm hearing from folks is so insightful. I'm hearing that when we're at this intersection of being LGBTQ plus and also being in this stage of life where we're evolving, which I love that reframe as well, Terrell-Lynn and Kyra. But when we're at this intersection, there are these needs that need to be met as a person who is evolving. And oftentimes spaces that do meet some of those needs are not as inclusive to LGBTQ plus folks. And so there is this wondering of where are we going to go? Where are we going to land to get some of these needs met? And Terrell-Lynn, if you have stuff you want to add to that as well, I think this has been really great.
The things that when I came back on the tail end of the conversation and Wayne was speaking, I've never really had those kind of concerns. I'm thinking, oh my God, where was I living? You know, for me not to have these concerns, because I just never thought about aging. You know, I was busy being a party girl. But then when it comes down to, wow, I have to possibly think about where am I going to live? I have to possibly think about, you know, will I have access to health care? Those things never ran across my mind. And it's like, oh my God. So I'm transitioning to a whole new life right now. And it's kind of scary to me.
Well, one of the things I can tell Wayne is that, like, I'm in one of the Christopher Homes projects, which is run by the Catholic Charities. And they supply several of the things you were wondering about. We do have courtyards. One's right outside my window here. And you can actually rent flower boxes. They're fairly large, but you can rent them for the people who like to work in the garden. They can set up their own gardens to go work in. And so you have that. They also have buses that will take people to doctor's appointments and grocery stores, the bank and everything else. So it's set up for people who have no transportation as well. So some of the communities are completely inclusive like that. Now, when I had somebody helping me move in, they got nervous because they were walking past pictures of the Pope, the statue of the Virgin Mary right outside the door. You know, and they say, are they going to accept you here? And surprisingly enough, well, not really if you know the Catholic Charities versus just the Catholic Church, they're very accepting. I haven't had any real problems here. Like I said, a few people mentioned, like, you know, you know, at 5'15" is what I call it. I get noticed when I go down the hallways. So, but it's like I've made friends with the people on the staff and the people on this floor and all, and it's been very good for me. I grew up in a house with multiple bedrooms, and I liked that space, and that's what I don't have anymore. So,
And that's what I'm hearing from you, Sally, and it makes me wonder, and it's like I'm judging myself without y'all hearing it. I'm like, I'm feeling like a spoiled little brat,
Exactly, yeah.
because I'm so used to having, I'm
Yeah.
used to having my own vehicle. I'm used to having an extra bedroom, an extra bathroom. I'm used to having all this space and, the ability to be able to do whatever I want to do to help other people if I so desire, if I'm able to do it.
well,
But, if I have to go into a place like this, then I won't be able to have those things anymore.
no, I still have my car. I've got good eyesight. I can still drive, and I can drive at night, which puts me way ahead of most of the elderly community. So that's what I do now to help people out. When I can't physically help any other way, I'll give them a ride to wherever they need to go.
Right.
But it's being limited in space, and you spend your entire life accumulating memories which have physical things attached to them. And now there's no space for the things that are attached to those memories.
But those memories mean so much.
Yeah.
And then those things begin to, mean just as much because
Yeah.
then you can't remember those, you can't remember like you used to be able to remember. I forget what I was thinking about mid-thought sometimes it's a real thing.
But it's one of those things where you do have to make adjustments. I went from 1,700 square feet and an attached garage to a studio apartment. And that's a difficult conversion to make. That transition was hard.
I also think about, all the work that I've been, because what, in the 90s, I was a sex worker. Life was different, it was party, go home, knock out, wake up, let's do it all over again.
All over again, yeah.
It just kept repeating itself. It was auto repeat, and then it came, here comes, my next big thing in life that knocked me off track, and it was Hurricane Katrina. Thank God, she really changed my life and me finding out my status. And, it was time to make a change, and then I wasn't working as a sex worker anymore. So I got into the fight and, in all of the trainings and becoming culturally competent and understanding and feeling what that means, in these days, it makes you wonder if people actually understand what that means. And are you actually culturally competent for people who are, any one of the letters, of LGBTQ? I mean, it's a real thing, I'm gonna need to understand that you're not going to hurt me or harm me, and that you understand, why we do what we do, even if you don't understand, at least have respect enough to ask and let's have a conversation like a human being.
Yeah.
I would like to just mention too that we're talking about access here to housing in New Orleans, and you mentioned Katrina, and of course Katrina destroyed a lot of homes, and we've never gotten back to the point of housing being able to supply what the city needs. And so if you don't have a lot of money, it's the looking for a place and trying to find a place that fits any of your requirements are really difficult. It may not even be there. And, so our housing is, everybody's housing is short everywhere from what I understand, but we have this particular situation here where we are dealing with a growing population with, with a lot of the housing having been destroyed, and the housing that's being replaced may not be affordable or accessible to us.
They're
Yeah.
definitely not affordable, because I hear people paying $1,600 a month for rent. That's unheard of. This is after Katrina, of course, and that's just unbelievable, because that's a mortgage to some people.
That's more
Yes.
than my mortgage was on my house.
Well, yeah, that was more than mine too, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
Like,
to rent an apartment these days, it's ridiculous.
Mhm.
It
It's
is
scary.
really ridiculous. Yeah, it's very,
And
like you
just
said.
just to bring it into perspective, we have all these battles about raising minimum wage, and they say, oh, you don't need to do that, just work harder and get into something else. Minimum wage will not rent you an apartment
not
if
at
you're
all.
only working one job.
Well, Sally,
And
I'm
that's
working now.
Yeah,
I'm working now, and I'm glad to be working right now. I
But-
do. My mind functions better when I can get
Yeah.
up and start moving and get stuff done. And
but those things we need to address if we're going to raise housing prices
Mhm.
so much. There needs to be some sort of compensation for the people who are working hard for a living or worked hard for 40 plus years to be able to afford to live somewhere. And we don't,
exactly.
because you have to force the fact that there's a minimum wage law means that they wouldn't pay the workers at all if they didn't have to.
And resources are so important because there's so many unmet, mental health, care. It's just not there.
yeah.
It's just not there when you stop and think of a whole city that was uprooted, and then eventually they find themselves back in the same boat again, but you have not confronted the issues
Mhm.
and how do you succeed after that?
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't own anything back then when Hurricane Katrina was there. I'm originally from Opelousas, so I was young back then. I was out here, and sowing my raw oats, I guess, whatever you want to call it. But at that time, I didn't own anything. It was easy come, easy go. But that was not the same for a lot of people who lived out here at that time, and all over the state. You actually own stuff that was passed down to you generation to generation, and then it's, all swallowed up by winds and water, and nothing is there to help you get through that.
Mm.
That's detrimental to someone's well-being.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Able to pick themselves up after.
Mhm.
And we have, I hate to interrupt this conversation. There's so much wonderful dialogue happening here. I'm hearing information about the impact of Katrina and how it deeply affected people's access to housing and affordable housing, especially as prices have been rising. And we know that this affordability is very much an issue for LGBTQ plus communities, as our community is disparately affected by financial insecurity. And so this is a real issue that y'all are raising. I am going to name that we do probably need to start moving to the audience Q&A to give some folks time to ask y'all questions. I am amazed by how fast this panel has gone by. It's been such rich conversation so far.
And
So
we have so much more to talk about.
I know. I'm like, we need to have a
Alright.
whole nother conversation sometime. Just record it, put it online. But this the first question I'm seeing is from one of our colleagues in Memphis, Kayla Gore. And Kayla, thank you for asking this question. This question is, how can housing providers make homes safer for the evolving community? I know that it's what's recommended from a development standpoint, but from your personal experience, what's practical? So for example, body alert devices, grab bars, security systems, what are some practical add-ins for folks who are evolving and want accessible housing?
I guess it depends on, for me, it would depend on where I'm at on that scale. Like, can I still live alone? Is it feasible for me to live in, an apartment by myself, or do I need somebody to live with me to keep a closer eye on me? You know, a grab bar might not be enough.
Well,
Somebody who can come in and assess those things.
there's a couple of small things that help. Like I said, in the shower area in particular, grab bars at the edges, as you're coming out, like maybe vertical grab bars to hold on to. Or maybe let's not have the step over bathtub. There aren't that many of the elderly that can get in and out of a bathtub, let's be honest. Because once you get down there, you got to get back up. And most of the people I see walking around the halls here, or shall I say, along with me, staggering down the hallways here, with their canes and their walkers and all, I don't see them as getting in and out of a bathtub. And roll-in showers would be a step up, and then the grab bar as you go from the shower back to the bathroom floor. The other thing would be to have grab rails on both sides of the toilet, because that's the other problem area of getting up and moving around. So, it's things to think about that you don't think about. Say, well, we put a grab rail on the front of the sink there, the basin next to you, so you've got that for your left hand, and then well, I'm right-handed, so that doesn't do me a whole lot of good. But you have to, we work these things out on our own. We put another walker in there or something, but little things like that you don't think of.
Or a bench to sit on while you shower.
Little things, and they're very keen on certain things, like they don't want any wires stretched across the floor because you might trip over them. Well, that's true of some thresholds too, So but it's just, the idea would be to get it as level as possible and as many places to grab hold of things as you can have. Because that's the problem my sister has at her house, is that she's older than I am, and just occasionally will be standing in a room and feel herself going over. It's not anything else except just her balance went.
I call it anticipating my fall and my rise, because if I'm going to do something and I know it's dangerous, but I'm cleaning my house and I need to get down here and I need to get this because it fell under the table or something like that, and so that means I got to get on my knees. That means I got to think about, hold up, let me make sure I plan my route back up. I need to make sure that there's a chair here that I'll be able to get. I don't know, it makes it sound like I'm so old and I'm crippled and stuff like that. But these knees they're not like Megan anymore. And I have to anticipate how I'm going to get back up if I intentionally go down.
Are we at the point of talking about models, like model living situation?
We are actually, Wayne, we are just about to run out of time, but why don't you share your point here, Wayne,
okay.
Real quickly, okay?
Okay, the financial assistance in a structure like Section 8. Section 8 is almost impossible to access here, and it's there's so many people trying to access it. But that kind of model where the rent is based, your rent is based on what your income is. You know, more structures like that for assistance for people seems really good. Another thing is a model living situation. You know, those small houses that they said just think out of your head if you wanted to, but those small houses that you see being constructed now, I'm thinking about a central clubhouse like with small houses around it, something like that. Just, I mean, I know that's far-fetched, but at the same time, it sounds wonderful to me to be able to have independence of living by oneself, but at the same time with having, you know, helping hands real close by in case anything is needed. So I just wanted to mention those two models.
Yeah, thank you, Wayne. That's great. The tiny homes or accessory dwelling units can be used in some of those ways. And I know the folks at my sister's house that Kayla Gore is doing down in Memphis are doing some of those. Kayla just mentioned in the chat. And Section 8 is so important for housing accessibility for folks. But we do, unfortunately, we've got to move on to some of the other wonderful content we're going to get to today. And just to flag, I did see some other questions in the chat for these folks, and we made note of them. So I'll be emailing panelists, if this is okay, I'll email you some of the other questions that folks had, and we can have more conversation over email or hop on the phone and call to answer some folks' other questions, if that's okay. Because I know there's so much rich conversation to be had here. But I just want to thank y'all so much for this conversation. All of you have shared such informative details today about housing and housing need for the community and your own personal experience. And I'm so incredibly grateful for all of the resilience and expertise and advocacy that you have brought to the community. And so thank you so much. Before we move on to our next conversation, I did want to flag that we talked some about housing challenges in this panel today. And one of those challenges can be housing discrimination and discrimination based on identity. So I did want to flag a resource for folks. The Louisiana Fair Housing Alliance does support people who have experienced housing discrimination on the basis of identity. And so if you have experienced housing discrimination, you can contact the Housing Alliance. And the Housing Alliance information I'm going to post in the chat now. But you can contact them if you have experienced housing discrimination to get some support. So again, panelists, thank y'all so much for being here. We really hope y'all can stay for the rest of this conversation today, and I'll be reaching out via email with some of the other questions that folks had today. So thank y'all so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Mhm.
Yep. Okay. So we are going to transition to some of this other wonderful content that we have for you all today. This next section of our conversation will be to showcase some interesting and unique housing efforts taking place in New Orleans. And these housing efforts are specifically working to bring LGBTQ plus affirming and affordable housing to the city. And so we're going to start today by hearing from our friends at Shelter Resources, Inc., otherwise known as Belle Reve. Belle Reve is an organization dedicated to bringing affordable housing to older adults in New Orleans. And they aim to provide affordable housing with an intention to serve diverse and minoritized populations that are often overlooked. But I will let our next speaker today share more about their exciting project. And so our speaker today from Belle Reve is William Bedwell. William uses he and him pronouns and is the executive director of Belle Reve since 2019. William is a graduate of the University of Alabama with postgraduate training from Columbia University and the Sustainability and Social Enterprise Institute in Florida. William has extensive experience in both the non-for-profit and private sectors. And having lived and worked as a marketing executive in Spain for over a decade, William is committed to dedicated and expanding and strengthening programs that will result in economic growth with a focus on social equity and economic equity in New Orleans and beyond. William is bilingual and enjoys offshore sport fishing and the outdoors, cooking, entertaining, and traveling. William, we are so glad that you are here, and we're so excited to hear more about Belle Reeve's housing work for LGBTQ+ older adults. And the floor is yours.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? First of all, I'd like to thank everyone at SAGE for inviting us to participate today and have the opportunity to share a little bit of the information about our current development. I'm also very excited to have John Leach on the phone on the call with us on the conference today, because he is with Olympic, who happens to be one of our partners in this development. So thrilled that he could join us as well. The other partner in this trio is Gulf Coast Housing Partnership, GCHP, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you, if that's all right, and I will walk you through some of the information regarding our. Let's get that up there for you. There we go. Share that one. There it is. Okay. All right. Get a little bit larger. So this is us, Belle Reeve. We've been around since 1993. This happens to be, well, actually, we were chartered in 1992. And we began operations in 1993. So it happens to be our 30th anniversary this year. We just celebrated that about a month or two ago. So we're thrilled that the new development and the ribbon cutting and the opening and the occupancy of this new partnership and this new affordable housing opportunity coincides with our 30th anniversary in the community. So as you can see there, we started back in 1993 providing housing, and there in the photo you can see our original campus over in the Bywater neighborhood of New Orleans. That's where we operated up until 2019, when we liquidated that property. That was a very large property scattered all around a campus, if you will. And over a 2-year period, we liquidated those, sold those properties to invest 100% of those proceeds into this development with Olympic and with GCHP. Up until that time, we were providing housing for low-income and homeless adults and families, people living with HIV and AIDS, since our beginning back in 1993. All right. At that time, 2019, our board of directors decided to change gears. Although HIV is still present and is still a challenge for many, many individuals, we are fortunate that it has become more of a manageable illness, a chronic illness, rather than what it was 30 years ago. So as such, we've been able to work with individuals to find more permanent housing, and people are able to take care of themselves in conjunction with their healthcare providers, their caseworkers, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a good thing. We have a long way to go, but we are fortunate that we can now focus on additional challenges regarding housing, not just HIV. So the board of directors back in 2019 decided that they were going to expand the housing opportunities, focusing on the aging adults, and particularly with a focus on those who are represented in the LGBTQ community. 85% of our board is made up of LGBTQ membership, as am I myself. So we all have a dog in the fight, if you will. We have a dog in the race. And so we are thrilled for this opportunity when we were approached and started to work out the details with our partners. The development is now complete. I'm going to say it's about 99% complete. We're still doing some touch-ups and some punch list work, but we have our certificate of occupancy. We are in the lease-up phase. There are 4, there you can see some initial images, pre-construction, but this is pretty much what it looks like. There are 92 apartments that are dedicated to our aging community, and those apartments are called the Belle Reeve apartments. The entire complex is referred to as H3C, and I want to tell you that, well, there you can see an image of our development as it's been completed. It's a pretty impressive accomplishment. And we're just thrilled of our, working together with our partners. I mean, there was no way we could have done this. The financing for it, as many will want to know, primarily through low-income housing tax credit program. And so there are many investors in the project, but the principals are Gulf Coast Housing Partnership, Alembic, Community Development, and ourselves, BellRev, or Shelter Resources. Here's another image there. What you're seeing here are 2 of the 4 blocks of housing of apartments. This is the main entrance from O.C. Haley Boulevard, former Dryads. And to the right, at the bottom right, behind those palm trees, that's also the location of the Ascension DePaul Community Health Center that's going to be on site. So we're thrilled to have them as part of this project, so that we'll not only be providing affordable housing opportunities for aging adults in the back, and I'll show you there's the 4 buildings. There you go. So you see there's 4 buildings. You can get a better view here. The 2 that are closest to you, those are our senior apartments, the BellRev apartments, and those in the background are the family units. Anyone seeking and applying and being approved for affordable housing would be in the back, 2 units there. All right, there's 100 units there, 50 in each building, and we have 92 for our seniors. All right, makes me feel old because I'm a year away from senior according to the HUD regulations. I'm 54, but this is actually for anyone 55 and above. But we're focusing on individuals who are 62 and older in our BellRev because we want to create these programs and services. Here you'll see another view of the finished terrace that's on O.C. Haley, and let's go back and overlook, because you can see from that terrace, you can see all downtown Superdome Smoothie King Center. So it's a wonderful location. It's built on the old Brown's Dairy parking lot. The actual dairy was a little bit you see the grassy area there. That is still vacant, but this was the location of the old Brown's Dairy parking lot in the area of Central City. And I did want to give some we're going to go into briefly talking about, there's the terrace I was showing you. Some of the outdoor spaces, I know there have been comments about requests for green spaces, outdoor spaces throughout the development. We have lots of those. So wonderful accommodations for our residents. A library will be on site. We'll have the health center. We have gymnasium, outdoor facilities. There's also additional parking down below. Here you see one of our, one of our important things we're trying to do is develop a sense of community. All right, that's one of the C's in H3C. And working with a local artist, Lenny Kern, we are developing in this green space. She's creating a giant sculpture that will be available. It's also visible from the street, so the public, the general public will be able to view it. You can see there on the right, that's an image of Blaney when she was visiting for the first time to start her design process. But anyway, wonderful. We want this, we imagine this as a crossroads, okay? It's located in Central City. So we want this to be a crossroads, not only an opportunity for affordable housing, but a crossroads in the community that bring in the other residents and other areas of Central City. All right, we want to, here I can talk to you briefly about pricing. You'll see that this is all income-based, all right, the affordable housing unit. Before I go into explaining this, I want to tell you that our the average rent in New Orleans in 2023 for a 900 square foot apartment is $1,357. All right, in Central City, the same area where our development is located, the average rent is $1,789. All right. The least expensive area of New Orleans and Orleans Parish is in the neighborhood Old Aurora, Inglewood Turn. That's in East New Orleans, and the same size apartment rent for about $868. Now that's on the very extreme. That's headed towards Slidell, across the lake, and direction of Mississippi. So that neighborhood is probably, I'm going to say, at least 20-25 minutes away from downtown New Orleans. Okay, so transportation issues. Well, Central City is right, as the name suggests, it's right in the middle of the city. So we have lots of public transportation options available to our residents, also available for non-residents to come and visit their families or relatives who may be living there with us. We did mention, I was talking the complex, the partnership is called H3C. The H represents health, and that we know that health is, housing is healthcare, and healthcare is housing, are part of it. The C's, community, culture, and commerce. And so we want, as I was mentioning, having a crossroads. We want to encompass all of those aspects in this development. All right. Income limits. To apply to qualify for housing here, we talk about AMI, or area median income, and one income limit. The minimum would be 11,480 in order to apply and be able to afford the rent, and the maximum to qualify, if you go over 34,440, well, that's too much. All right, and this is an aggregate total amount that encompasses all revenue that's incoming, whether that be from disability, whether that be from a side hustle, from one's job, whatever the case may be. So these are the totals, and they're not set by us, they're set by HUD. All right. Additionally, we do have utility allowances for each of the apartments. So $65 for a 1-bedroom, $85 for a 2. We have very few. I think we have a total of about 5 in the senior development. We have about 5 2-bedrooms. But you can also, if you come down the rent, what we're talking about, with the difference between the gross and the net, we have a gross of $307 for a 1-bedroom. If someone's at 20% AMI, the net is $242. That's just deducting the $65 stipend for the utility allowance. Okay. There you see the total number that we have, 64 and 28. I told you incorrectly. Those are the total number of units throughout the senior side of the development. Okay. Here's some of the marketing materials that we've been using to promote the opportunities over the past couple of years. The various media through the radio. I think someone had mentioned WHIV earlier. We've done some broadcasts in collaboration with WHIV. I love our print materials, Ambush Magazine, numerous presentations throughout this community, working with the membership of the LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce, working with our associate No Age here, Jim Meadows and his group. So very active over the past couple of years, participating in the LGBT Pride Parade, promoting the opportunities. And so we are in the process of lease up still, and there are still available units. So we would encourage anybody locally who is interested to reach out. I'm going to give that number. I'll put it also in the chat, but if you want to take down the number, I can give that to you. Let's see, where did I put it? It's 504-332-0462. That is for the property management office. If you'd like to call and make an appointment, come by and take a look, have a view. We would encourage you to do so. They can also provide more information and specifics about what's required to apply, the process, the information that you'll need to bring with you, and so forth. But the first stop would be to give them a call, 504-332-0462. Okay. We were very fortunate to receive a grant from the LGBTQ Fund of the Greater New Orleans Foundation, and that was earlier, back in the summer, end of the spring, and they were quite generous because of the advocacy that we are promoting and the work with the LGBTQ community, because we do realize the importance and the challenges, the additional challenges for members of the LGBTQ community. Obviously, we can't guarantee X number of units, but we are actively promoting it. We're actively promoting a welcoming environment, an active environment. This is not a retirement home. This is an active, vibrant community. And we believe and feel and encourage the LGBTQ aging adults to be a part of that community. So I want to thank you all for the opportunity again. And again, I'll put that in the chat. I'll stop sharing my screen here, and I'll go back to the chat and get the telephone number for you. And you can share that amongst yourselves. Oh, Thomas has already put it in there for us. Okay, thank you very much. Again, yeah, anything that we can do, if we can provide additional information, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Our website is bellrevnola.org, BELLE. I'll put that in the website. There's also an email that you can reach out to us, info@bellrevnola.org. There's the website. Okay. So I wish everybody well. I wish happy holidays, everybody, and look forward to hearing back and some feedback from you.
Thank you so much, William. This is a very exciting project. There's lots of great feedback in the chat people commenting on the beautiful design and things of that nature. We are running behind on time here, so we won't have an opportunity for questions for William. But William, there are some important questions that have been raised in the chat about previous properties from Bellrev, and then also a question about this current property. So I would ask that you pop in the chat and answer those questions
Sure.
if you don't mind.
No, we'll go back in there and I'll do some reviewing while we move forward, and I'll get back to everybody. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And of course, if your questions, if you don't feel as though your question has been answered or you want to follow up later, just send me an email and I can connect you with William at the right time. So thank you all so much. And we are going to move on to our next wonderful speaker today, who will share about some more exciting development work happening in New Orleans. So we are now going to get to hear from Joe Fay, who works with A Home Among Friends. A Home Among Friends is an organization dedicated to providing affordable housing and community experiences for LGBTQ+ older adults. I will let Joe share more about A Home Among Friends, but I'm going to briefly introduce him. Joe uses he and him pronouns, and Joe is the founder and president of A Home Among Friends located in New Orleans. Prior to Joe's working retirement, Joe spent 30 years in nonprofit marketing, development, and leadership at organizations including the American Red Cross, Reading is Fundamental, and the Children's Brain Tumor Foundation. Joe is a graduate of Boston College and Columbia University's Graduate School of Business. And between college and graduate school, he served as a U.S. naval officer. Joe moved during retirement to New Orleans, where his husband, Dan, grew up. Joe, thank you so much for being here today. And I'm just very excited to hear about your initiative with A Home Among Friends. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you all so much for letting me be part of this conversation. It's so gratifying to be among people who are concerned about this issue as much as we are at Home Among Friends. We have, over the last 50 years, as I counted, done tremendous things in our community. We've fought battles against discrimination. We've fought battles against AIDS. We've fought battles against transphobia, and none of those battles have been won yet. But we've made headway, I think it's fair to say. And in that context, I think we have at least one more battle to fight together. And so part of what I'd like to do over the course of the next few minutes is just talk to you about what we're doing and ask you to enlist helping us to fight this battle. Here's the problem, if I can briefly synopsize it. There are 1.5 million, according to the census, 1.5 million LGBTQ adults seniors in the United States, and that number is only going to grow. The last of the baby boomers are going to turn 60 next year, and the first of Gen X will turn 60 the following year. So good news, at least to me, who's certainly an elder, there's lots of us out there. The bad news is that 40% of seniors overall rely solely on Social Security. Social Security median or average monthly payment is $1,700 a month. It's difficult to find an apartment in New Orleans, let alone New York, Seattle, Chicago, Los Angeles for even that amount. And in fact, if you have $1,000 a month that you have to spend on an apartment, you're left with $750 to pay for food and clothing and medicine and medical care and utilities and what you have left to live your life. The just checking my notes. So the other points is that talking to our local data center, which is a community resource, there are, according to them, approximately 1,000 LGBTQ seniors now living who are in need, who have limited resources that put them in a rent a rent dependent situation. They can't actually afford the rent they have to pay. Moreover, according to a local news station here, WDSU, there are more hungry seniors in New Orleans than there are in any other city in the country. We face more hunger here. So obviously our rent dependence here limits our ability to feed ourselves. Not all of us have that problem, but some of our brothers and sisters do. And our goal is to try to address that. That's the financial problem. There's also a social problem. I'm going to put my glasses on for a second because, like many of us, I can't see without them. Pew Research says that LGBTQ seniors are less likely to have supportive networks than our heterosexual counterparts. That isn't surprising, I suppose, to any of us. We, in many cases, don't have children, in many cases, don't have families to support us. But that has implications. According to Pew, 60% of surveyed older adults in the LGBT community feel a lack of companionship, and over 50% reported feeling isolated. We've heard that from the panelists who spoke earlier. Social isolation has physical consequences. Those who are isolated are 29% more likely to have heart disease, 32% increased risk for stroke, 50% increased risk for developmental dementia. So clearly we have a real problem that we need to address, because our LGBTQ seniors or evolving folks like myself are both financially strapped and socially isolated. Those two problems are two problems that we at A Home Among Friends believe we can help solve. We aren't the only solution. There are many out there, and we are eager to see all of them because, as I said earlier, local census data says that even just in New Orleans, there are at least 1,000 LGBTQ seniors who are in need of low-income housing. And to a point made earlier, I attended various conferences here. There are 40,000 people overall here on the waiting list for subsidized housing, and another 10,000 people here on the waiting list for Section 8 vouchers. We're not going to solve all those problems. We're not big enough. We're never going to be. But we feel like we ought to try to solve the problems of our shared family, our brothers and our sisters who need the support. And here's how we propose to do it. I'll take you through the slides in a few minutes, but let me just say a few things first. A critical difference is that we're in our efforts is to try to create housing with a price point of about $500 to $600 a month. That would be less than or roughly a third of what the average Social Security income is, which we believe allows people to have resources to do the other things they need to do in life. A second difference is that we're building small communities. I was so impressed by the size of the AC3 community. We have a different view, and of course, it's just a different view. It's another way of approaching this problem that all of us need to work on. Our small communities, which I'll show you in a moment, exist in current neighborhoods. They are walkable neighborhoods. The property you see in front of us is actually not far from where my husband and I live, and is walkable to grocery stores, to pharmacies, to restaurants, and all of our communities would be in those places. A third difference is that we know, by having spoken to community leaders, the government in the city, that we can do these developments without applying for zoning variance, which is a big issue here. And the final difference that we would point out is our financial structure. These facilities will be self-sustaining based on rent receipts once built. All we're seeking is capital support, and we know that there is capital support available from Louisiana Housing Corporation and locally as well. We've talked to a number of people very successfully who are more than interested, enthused about this, and who know that we have resources to bring to the table once we're able to acquire, renovate, and inhabit our first model. The final difference, excuse me, the final difference is that we are a volunteer-led board. We are grateful that Jim Meadows from No Age is on our board. We also have Alan Wagesbeck, who works in the city and who is an interior designer and who is well known in the community. My husband is also on the board. He is a residential and landscape designer with many years of experience, and myself at the moment. None of us draw salaries. All of the expenses to date for this effort have been paid out of pocket by ourselves. And so we don't need salaries to be able to get this underway, and we think that's an important difference too. So let me just briefly take you through the slides. And these are being operated by a friend up in Brooklyn, so I'm going to ask her to go to the next slide. What you see are two different properties that are locally available for purchase, renovation, and conversion into the kinds of properties we have in mind. If we go to the next slide, this is just a rendering of what the first property could look like, and the next slide, a rendering of what the second property could look like. And noteworthy, these are both properties that are in existing neighborhoods using a housing typology that's common here called shotgun. Shotguns are basically 5 individual rooms straight back that can be converted from what are now typically duplexes into 4plexes. And if we go to the next slide, this is the outdoor space that Wayne alluded to, that we need to be able to have communities. So we have all of our properties would have outdoor space and encourage community development. Next slide. And this is an example of how we're divided up. So our basic proposition is take the housing typology of a shotgun, split it in 2 on each side, have 500 square feet of living space. You have 2 rooms plus a accessible bathroom and storage. You have a full kitchen. You have access to the outdoors. And the essential issue beyond being affordable is to use the small community model to create communities, to create friendships, to create someone who can come by and see if you're okay. That to us is the essential issue. That to us is why our tagline is not just housing, but home, because we want to create homes for people where they feel, look, in the LGBTQ community, we've created our own families for generations. This is the same approach. Help people live together in places that respect their dignity, give them what they need in ADA, affordable, accessible housing, take into account all the things that the panelists talked about to make them work for our community, and then create an environment where a community can form, a family can form. The next slide shows a slightly larger version. This is the second property that we saw earlier. And again, the model is exactly the same, 500 square feet, not a lot, but enough to have 2 separate rooms, a full kitchen, facilities around the property to encourage communal living. And one of the things that's attractive about New Orleans, I found, having lived in the Northeast and on the West Coast, is that you can be outside much of the year here. You might not be able to be outside in the dead of summer, but most of the rest of the year you can be outside. So we're able to use these spaces year round. And then the next slide shows an overhead view of what you would see in this kind of unit. And again, these use abundant shotgun housing in this community, though I suspect that in other communities around the country, the same model could work with another typical kind of housing unit that exists in those communities. And then the next slide shows what you would see from the inside of one of these units. Again, in this case, is configured as a kitchen with a bedroom in the back through to the back space. And then the next slide and the last slide shows what the bathroom would look like. You can see we don't have bathtubs, we have showers, and specifically roll-in showers, and we'll put in grab bars to make sure that people are safe. So our proposition, which is different than HC3, but there is an enormous need. So all of us are welcoming to one another in this effort. Our proposition is that you can take the kind of housing that we have in New Orleans, convert it into 4-plex units or 8-plex units or 12-plex units for communities to grow up in existing neighborhoods that incorporate themselves into a neighborhood that are within walking distance of amenities, that create or provide the opportunity to create families within those housing communities. If there are questions, I'm happy to answer them. There may be some. And again, thank you so much for letting me be part of this.
Thank you so much, Joe. There's, such wonderful traction at the chat. I encourage you to check out what folks are saying. There's so much excitement around this really unique model. Similarly to William, we are running behind on some time, so I would ask that you answer questions, folks, in the chat directly, if that's okay.
Sure.
And any questions that folks have for either of these two speakers, feel free to follow up with me after this event. At the end of the event, I'll be posting my email in the chat, and I can connect y'all with Joe or with William to engage around these wonderful models more. But to both Joe and William, thank you so much for sharing more about these efforts to house LGBTQ+ older adults in New Orleans. We're so excited about these initiatives, and we're so grateful for both Belle Rev and Home Among Friends for your commitment to LGBTQ+ older adults. Thank you for sticking with us through this afternoon event. It's been such an informative conversation so far, and we're really, really excited for this last panel today. So we are going to go ahead and dive in. This panel is full of community advocates who are working to support community members in New Orleans and across the state of Louisiana. Our conversation today will center advocacy opportunities to help support LGBTQ+ older adults who need affordable housing. These panelists are experts in their field, organizers, some of them are community members themselves. So we're so grateful to hear about their experience and their knowledge today. So panelists, as I introduce you, feel free to come on camera so that our participants can see you. And I will be introducing panelists with abbreviated versions of their bios for the sake of time, but all panelists' full bios can be found on our event website if you'd like to know more. So our first panelist today is Luann White. Luann uses she, her pronouns. Luann White is the co-founder and executive director of Luvis Services, a nonprofit affordable housing developer focused on increasing housing opportunities for people who are experiencing houselessness in New Orleans. Ms. White, an expert in permanent supportive housing, has worked in the supportive housing industry for over 25 years. Luann, thank you so much for being here today. Our next panelist is Peyton Rose Michelle, who uses she and her pronouns. Peyton is a 26-year-old trans woman based in Lafayette, Louisiana. She serves as the first executive director of Louisiana Trans Advocates, where she leads Louisiana trans advocates legislative initiatives and helps to lead LOCAL, which stands for the Legislative Organizing Coalition for All LGBTQ+ Louisianans. She also became the first openly transgender person to be elected in the state of Louisiana in July of 2020. Peyton, thank you so much for being here. Our last panelist is John Lee, who uses he and him pronouns. John, director at Alembic Community Development in New Orleans, is a real estate developer and urban planner focused on implementing redevelopment projects in partnership with community-based organizations. Since joining Alembic in 2006, Jonathan has worked in low-income communities of color to build joint venture partnerships with nonprofit organizations and to leverage public and private investments for affordable housing, nonprofit facilities, and commercial spaces. Jonathan holds a master's in city planning from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and was a Rockefeller Fellow through the University of Pennsylvania's Center for Urban Redevelopment Excellence. John, thank you so much for being here. So we are gonna just dive right into this panel, and thank you all for being here today. Panelists, we will be having an audience Q&A time at the end of this panel. So we will have audience members submit their questions in the chat, similar to the last panel, and we will have some time to answer them at the end of our conversation today. So earlier today, we heard from our first panel about some of the challenges faced by LGBTQ+ older adults in New Orleans when attempting to find safe, affordable, and accessible housing. What are some ways that your organization helps support people with housing needs? And for this question, I'd love to hear from each of you individually so folks get to know a little bit more about your organization. So Peyton, why don't you start us off today, if you don't mind?
Sure. Peyton Rose Michelle, she, her pronouns, and I'm the executive director of Louisiana Trans Advocates. We are the state's only statewide trans-specific organization. We try to do everything we can with not historically very much. We focus on advocacy work. We focus on socially supporting and like resource supporting trans and gender nonconforming people across the state. And we do education like this and on a more micro level to just help folks, feel more comfortable with trans folks in their environment. Housing, it should be a human right, in my opinion. I always get frustrated just talking about it because the idea that we even have to discuss accessing housing is something I think we should not be doing, because I think we shouldn't have to, it should not be such an issue. But the work that we do, we often help youth that are being having emergency housing situations, and we'll help them find some people that can, help them at least temporarily or more permanently. We, have communities where we connect trans and queer people together so that they can commingle and share the information that they know, because I just don't believe any organization can have all of the knowledge. It's a communal thing. And we also work on an advocacy basis to try to ensure that Louisianians have housing protections. Apologize for my dogs if you could hear them. But yeah, so we do whatever we can and we support whatever we can to get housing for everyone.
Thank you so much, Peyton. It's just so amazing to have you here. I know y'all are holding a lot as the state's only trans-specific organization. And so we're just so grateful for your time and your experience and expertise here on this panel. Luann, why don't you answer the same question if you don't mind, and hop in next.
Sure. First, I'd like to say thanks for giving us the opportunity to talk about what we're doing, and I'm very excited to participate in this conversation. I am the co-founder and executive director of Luvis Services. We are a nonprofit affordable housing developer based here in New Orleans. We are a team of volunteers with experience ranging from homeless advocacy, fundraising, law. So we have a wide range of skills that we bring to the table. We have an architect on our team. We utilize or use the collaborative approach to access housing, create housing opportunities for people who are homeless. We are looking to create inclusive projects, and we're 100% volunteer run. Our mission is to find creative solutions to house and support people who are homeless. And our vision is to increase affordable housing opportunities for people who are living on the streets, in their cars, in shelters, and abandoned buildings here in New Orleans, and create homes that are safe and comfortable for them. We work in collaboration with lots of different organizations and corporations, and our goal is to significantly decrease the number of homeless folks in New Orleans. In New Orleans, we have a little over 1,300 people that are unhoused. So we started in 2015, we organized and got our 501c3 status and got everything going together with Propeller, which is an organization here in New Orleans that is an incubator for entrepreneurs. So we started there, and we created from a model that we think works for people. We held listening sessions in the homeless community. We went to the Rebuild Center, a few churches where people got their food and took their showers, and day shelters. And we got feedback throughout our process of developing our plans for the housing. So our approach is, we think, pretty holistic. We have created a prototype that's located at 2229 Fats Domino in the lower 9th Ward. And it is a tiny house duplex. It is very spacious, even though it's small. We have large porches. It looks like a traditional shotgun. We did a lot of meetings in the lower 9th Ward. We were talking about Katrina earlier, and the lower 9th Ward, of course, was really devastated by Katrina, and there's still quite a few empty lots and blighted properties. So our goal, in addition to creating housing for folks who don't have access to housing, is to add value to the lower 9 community. We think that they clearly need more people. They need more houses to get rid of some of these blighted properties. That's part of the reason why we decided to go there. So our project is, like I said, at 2229 Fats Domino. It's accessible with a bus that goes right by the house, and it goes to the grocery store and shopping in Chalmette, and then it goes to downtown New Orleans. And there are there's one other bus that goes to there. So it isn't as accessible as Central City, but at some point we'll be looking to build over there as well. So the housing is affordable and sustainable. One of the units is fully accessible. I heard people talking about the need to have showers instead of bathtubs. It's a very accessible unit. We met with the Greater New Orleans Housing Alliance resident advisors when we were going over the plans, and they really helped us design the accessible unit. So there's a ramp that leads to the unit, and both units have these very nice large porches. We also include supportive services as part of what we're doing. We're looking to make sure that either they're connected to services and have access to case management, or whatever their need, are getting their physical health taken care of. They have drug and alcohol issues. We are working with them we use a harm reduction approach. So we're not forcing anybody to do anything. We're just trying to make sure that they're in a safe, comfortable environment. So they're not worrying about where they're going to get their food, so they can actually focus on some of their needs. So we're currently, we have 2 tenants who came to us with case management services already in place, and they are doing well in the units and seem to be feeling safe and comfortable there. The other part of our model is an edible landscape program. So we're putting fruit trees, vegetables and berries on each property. Tenants are encouraged to get involved. We have raised beds so that anyone who has mobility issues or needs to be in a chair, they can access those. We have a master gardener that is working with us to create the project. So that is our idea. We actually have built one, and our goal is to replicate the model. So the one unit, the prototype, has been very well supported by the community, the Lower 9 community, the city of New Orleans as a whole. We recently were awarded the Built Environment Award for Love Your City. And then we were awarded 4 more properties that we're planning to develop as well. We were lucky in the beginning to be able to get pro bono services. The Nano interior design, they did an amazing job with creating the design. They managed the construction for us. They did just an awesome job, and we are very, very grateful to Terry Dreyer and her team at Nano. We also had a great construction contractor, Colmex Construction. They were able to join us in the design process when we were all meeting to talk about what we wanted. We would do the designs and then take them to the community and get feedback. But it was great to have Colmex in the room with engineers and architects, so that we talked about ideally what it would look like, and then have the reality check from the actual contractor to say, yes, that works, or maybe we should change this. So it was really a great process for us. Our biggest challenge, of course, was money, financing the project. We heard a lot of no's from banks and finance agencies, lots of no's. But we're not a really we don't take no very well. We finally got financing through a Nucor Corporation, and at our open house, the representative from Nucor got up and talked about how many different times we came in there, and they would say no, and then we would go back and do something different, and then we'd go back again, and then they'd say no. But I think like on the 4th try, we were able to get the financing for it. And we got our permanent financing through Hope Credit Union. So they have been really wonderful and are interested in financing our next project. So we're working on putting the money together to build 4 more houses. We originally had a contract with Louisiana Housing Corporation for this first house, and they provided project-based vouchers. So it was a situation where if they have an income, they pay 20% of their income. If they don't have an income, then they don't pay anything. we pay for utilities and everything that they need. The homes come fully furnished with washer and dryer. And we were able to move forward with our plans, and we've been able to get lots of opportunities. So we used the voucher program with Louisiana Housing Corporation, and while we were waiting for our tenants, we just had a bunch of tours. We invited organizations and community members to come and look. So what came from that is more collaborations for us, which is what we really think needs to happen in order to help people get off the streets. It needs to be a community effort. So we're working for these next 4 houses, we're working with the Travelers Aid Society, and they're gonna master lease the units, and they work with folks that are living outside and in shelter, so they'll be able to bring their folks in and provide all the wraparound services, including transportation, case management. So we're really excited about this opportunity that we're going to have to work with them. So I think
Awesome.
That's it.
Thank you, Luann. It's very exciting to hear about your work, and we really appreciate your dedication to supporting people who are transitioning from houselessness. We know that particular transition is an acute need for the LGBTQ plus community, specifically for trans folks and trans older adults. We know that is a real need as well. So we appreciate your commitment to folks who are transitioning from houselessness, and your work is very incredible. So thank you so much. And lastly, excited to hear from John about his work with Alembic, and some of the ways that you are supporting folks who have housing needs. So John.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for this opportunity to be here and join these other panelists. So Jonathan Light with Alembic Community Development. We are a mission-driven developer. We focus on affordable and supportive housing, and then commercial spaces that are community serving. So we created a grocery store in a low-income food desert, schools, nonprofit office spaces, cultural arts spaces. We're currently working on 2 early childhood education centers that serve low-income families. Everything we do, all of our projects are joint ventures with nonprofit organizations, and for us, that's incredibly important. We know that unfortunately, we consider ourselves a bit of accidental developers. As Thomas mentioned, I'm an urban planner by training. Real estate, unfortunately, is history and discrimination, racism, extraction of communities is one of the worst offenders. And so we see real estate as a means to an end. Unfortunately, it gets prioritized, but what's important is that real estate is serving people, that buildings are serving people, that the spaces that are created are for people, whether that's affordable housing or nonprofits, for organizers and other things. We've completed 2 senior projects now in New Orleans. William, it was great to hear William's presentation earlier of the H3C project in Central City on Aretha Catholic Haley Boulevard. He said we're one of the co-developers on that development, and have worked in that community for many years. So it's incredibly rewarding now to finally have that completed and starting to lease up. One note I want to say about H3C is that it's actually 100% affordable. I believe one of the slides noted that it was 40%, but it's actually 100% affordable for seniors earning less than 60% of area median income. The first senior development we completed in New Orleans is in the Lower Ninth Ward, not far from where Luann's project is as well, called the TEP Center. It stands for the Tate, Etienne, and Prigo Center. This is one of 2 schools that was first desegregated in the Deep South in November 1960, several years after Brown versus Board of Education. And at the same time that Ruby Bridges desegregated the Friends School, that many people may know that story, kind of lost to history, was that 3 other 6-year-old Black girls desegregated McDonough 19 in the Lower Ninth Ward on St. Claude Avenue. And we're very fortunate to meet one of those girls who formed a community organization as an older woman. And we joint ventured with them to salvage Midtown 19 school building and redevelop it into 25 affordable senior apartments, along with a anti-racism training space for the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, which is a longtime anti-racism training organization here in New Orleans, along with an interpretive center on the history of school desegregation and civil rights. Anyway, lots of other thoughts and ideas, but I'll pause there.
Thanks so much, John. It's so exciting to hear about your work as well. And we appreciate the work that you've done with Bell Rev to create affirming and affordable housing for our community. And so thank you so much. But we are here to talk about advocacy. And I know that lots of folks on this call are curious about ways that they can engage with some of these issues, whether the issue is houselessness, whether it's rights for trans folks, discrimination, affordable housing. I know early in our panel, we talked about issues with folks who are navigating housing as an older adult. So there's so many different ways that I'm sure people are curious they can engage in these issues. And so as folks in this field, what are some creative ways that we can engage with these issues? And I will open this conversation to all the panelists to hop in and sort of engage with each other. So go for it.
I could start. I think we're an interesting example because we're a developer. We always are seeking out nonprofit partners. Bell Rev, as you mentioned, was a phenomenal one. We started when the HGBTQ development was starting. We knew it was going to be affordable housing. We knew we wanted to have a component that was senior housing, but we were not initially focused on the LGBTQ housing or affirming housing. And it was really a meeting that our partner had with William that helped steer in that direction. And we were beyond receptive to it. I mean, once that came forward, we were really excited to go in that direction. I said before, we've done regular senior housing. The interaction between developers and community organizations and advocates can be pretty fraught. But I would say that's not true for all developers, and we're not the only example of those, of some who are looking for real partnerships and are looking for real value, real engagement with individuals, with residents, and with organizations. I would say, I think sometimes when working with advocates and organizations, they don't always recognize the power and influence they can have within real estate development. William knows that their involvement really supported the financing of H3C. Their involvement was able to help secure, Weinberg Foundation money. Having narrative plays a very important role in real estate development these days. I mean, particularly when so many of the community development tools are so hyper competitive. Narrative around the impact that we'll have, and I don't mean BS narrative. I mean actually authentic, real narrative around impact that projects are having can really help set a project apart. And I think that gets informed best by advocates, by folks who are working and organizing, folks who are really in community in a way that developers just can't be and aren't good at, frankly.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, John. I think having community partners engaged with developers really brings important community perspective and also just really, like you said, really important narrative to the work that affordable housing developers are doing. So thank you for sharing that. Peyton, Luann, any other thoughts on how folks can engage in advocacy around the issue of housing, around the issue of LGBTQ plus rights, especially for older adults? Yeah, opening the floor.
So there are a couple of organizations that that we're members of that I think are key and we participate with the Greater New Orleans Housing Alliance. They fight to or advocate for more affordable housing in New Orleans. They address issues of poor housing. We recently got a housing trust money for a housing trust in New Orleans, which is the first time, and they were proponents and they designed the thing, the funding model. So we will have more access to funds and regularly have access since the city created this affordable housing fund. So we're excited about that. I think there's opportunities for small communities to get involved. I know in the lower Ninth Ward, we originally faced quite a bit of pushback in terms of, first of all, building tiny houses, and then the fact that we were providing housing for people who are experiencing homelessness, and we just educated people. We just encouraged them to tell us how they felt about it, and then we addressed those issues. We were able to build support over the years just by getting involved. The other thing I think is helpful is we consider ourselves a community developer, so we need community support and community feedback. And we have worked in the lower nine. We joined several organizations, so we're not seen as just a developer who comes and builds something and then goes away. We want people to see us as members of the community. So we work with the Lower Ninth Ward Voters Coalition for civic engagement, encouraging people to register to vote and educate people. So we think that is one of the things that needs to happen, is that we all need to, educate folks and listen when people have issues and address those.
Yeah, before, in my preparation for thinking about what I wanted to say here, I was already preparing to say that I think redevelopment of housing and of property is a superpower. Having the funds and capacity to do so is a superpower. And I'm just so grateful that both of y'all in your own ways are just making it happen, because as an advocacy person, I feel so disconnected from that. In my way, I talk to the legislators about why they should be caring and etc. But I really love what John said about kind of connecting the community and the advocacy with the financing of it, because you're absolutely right. That's why it's a superpower, because you're able to connect all of it and make it become one and do something amazing with it and heal the environment with it, the land. So I really love that. And the question was something about advocacy and how people can get involved. So while I don't have anything specific, I think the Greater New Orleans Housing Alliance is a great place. The Louisiana for Action Center is a great place. Those are great places to plug in. And other organizations and alliances and coalitions that get involved. I always try to tell people there are a million ways to be an advocate. In many ways, just existing is advocacy these days. So just find what makes sense to you, find what you're capable of, and just lean in. And for some people, that's getting involved with these organizations and doing email action alerts to, city council or the legislators. For some people, it's making phone calls. For some people, it's showing up to meetings. For some people, it's donating money. For some people, it's sharing stories. And, there's so many other ways. So I think it's a good reminder for me as an advocate, to expand my advocacy and connect more with like people doing all kind of work, more so to ensure that we can all be empowered in our works. So that's what it's about.
Yeah, thank you all so much. I think it's so important to hear about the local organizations that we can engage in, and really important to hear about the development efforts that are happening. And I think even what you're saying, Luann, about educating communities and making sure that communities feel engaged in this process is such a beautiful way to bring community members into this space. And I think that what you've done is a real beautiful example of how to make sure that as developers, as folks who are building housing, we're not just running into communities and staking our claim, but we're really engaging folks in what their needs are and how we can support them. And so I really appreciate all of the perspectives that you all are bringing. But we have about 5 more minutes before we're going to open the floor to some of the questions that folks are bringing up. And so to close us out today, I wanted to ask a more visioning type question. And this question is, when you envision a more equitable housing landscape for LGBTQ plus older adults in New Orleans, what do you see and what would it take for us to get there? We've got about 5 minutes, so I know that's not enough time, but I'm going to ask that y'all just dive in. So go for it.
I think while it obviously is a very specific needs, a lot of which were voiced earlier and throughout this panel for queer elders or LGBTQ plus elders, I also think it really just takes our state or our country, our communities to care about housing for everyone. I mean, we're all barking up a tree when our legislators don't care if we have housing, if we have access to affordable housing or good quality housing that meets the needs of the community. And I don't see that happening right now in any super meaningful way on a statewide level. And I know that the city council, I'm in Lafayette, but I do know the New Orleans City Council has also stepped in, different things, and Lafayette does too. All the city councils do. So I think it takes really engaging with our electeds and educating them and holding them accountable and kicking them out when they act like they don't care if people have houses.
Yeah, I guess I envision for the future, just, well, aside the fact that everybody is in a safe and comfortable house and not on the streets and in tents, I envision that. And I think there are lots of different ways to get there. So when we talk about developing housing, most recently we had a conversation with Tulane University's architectural school, and they want to collaborate with us on creating a tiny house that they build somewhere, and then disassemble it and move it to the property and then reassemble. So we think I think we need to be creative, and we need to be open to different ideas. So we have abandoned buildings that need to be brought into space where people can live in them. We have lots of empty lots in some areas of the city. We have people talking about tiny houses and the possibility of what they used to call mother-in-law, but accessory dwelling units, but they used to call them mother-in-law units. But I think there's just different, we can build the scattered site housing model like we're doing, just building in different communities. We can do the buildings like what what's been presented today. We just need to be open and flexible and look at everything. Any and everything that we can do to make it happen.
I would just echo what Kate Rose said initially, which is that housing should be a human right. And I hope that is what we all hold on to. And even further, affordable housing should be a human right. We know that there's a lot of steps to get there. I would also say that housing is not enough in communities. It's an overwhelming problem, but we need amenities, we need services, we need commercial development, we need all kinds of things that serve people. And I think too often the focus, especially as we know in low-income communities, is appropriately around affordable housing, but that's at the expense of other assets that are needed and other kinds of investments. And I'm not talking about like gentrification type investments, but actually like responsible investments. And then lastly, I'd say we also know that we can't build our way out of this problem of affordable housing across certainly the country and beyond. And there's an income side equation to this. And so in order for everyone to kind of live and age with dignity and to care for themselves and to care for our families, we have a huge income problem. And so my vision would be that we're addressing this in multiple ways, not only just provision of more affordable housing, but also working to raise people's incomes and standard of living.
Yeah, thank you all for that. I think it's very hopeful to envision a world in which, as you said, John, people can age and live with dignity, especially for LGBTQ plus older adults, many of whom have been advocating and have been resilient for years and years and years in the face of great adversity. To have a place to rest and age with dignity is so, so important. And as well, I think, Peyton, what you shared about engaging with electeds is so important as we think about developing affordable housing, having folks care about housing as a human right, and also engaging around issues of income and income inequality, as John shared. And I know it was mentioned on our other panel as well. So this has been really rich so far. Thank you all so much. I know we do have some questions in the chat. We're probably not going to be able to get to all of them. And so same as the previous panel, I've been taking note of all of these questions, and folks on our team have as well. So if your question does not get answered today, we will certainly try to follow up and make sure that all of these questions get addressed. And as I shared, I will put my email in the chat at the end of this event for folks who want to engage around their questions further, especially if your question did not get answered. But the first question I'm seeing here, and I think this will probably be a question for folks who are more on the development side of things. But the first question is, can there be carve-outs for people living with HIV who are aging when it comes to housing? And I know with fair housing regulations and carve-outs, there can be real complications in terms of making sure that minoritized communities are supported. So if y'all could share about opportunities for carve-outs for people living with HIV and people who are aging, that would be awesome.
This is William with yeah, Don, we can tag team this one, but again, with the Affordable Housing and Fair Housing Act, well, you can't carve out for anybody, all right? So as long as anybody in this particular case qualifies, and that's simply age requirements and income requirements, then we encourage everybody to apply, without HIV, without disability. Again, this is not an assisted living facility, it's an affordable housing development. So it's an independent living situation. So any resident will have to be taking care of their own health. We'll have services and healthcare, community health workers that will assist and help. But again, it's it's just up to the individual, and the qualifiers are primarily that the income limits are met and the background checks and everything else that's required. But that's the same. That's across the board, the same for everyone. Okay, so there are no specific carve outs for HIV or diabetes or any other illness. John.
Yeah, I was going to add, fair housing is such a such a tricky thing. It's such an important thing, obviously, from a policy perspective, and we know it's not followed, and it's violated constantly, unfortunately. And the protections that it should offer are so important. At the same time, it's the goal of preventing discrimination also doesn't have the flip side of facilitating inclusion, and actually then targeting in the positive sense of serving people, like serving communities that have been underserved. It prevents that, as William said, as folks I'm sure know. And so I think that could certainly be a charge for advocates, developers, for policy folks, for everyone of, there's constant conversations around fair housing, and how can it go from just a prevention tool, at least in theory, to one that's more activating, and one that can be also followed. I should say also that we can do, and we do set aside for folks with that are for permanent supportive housing, right, which comes with certain things. So there are set asides you can do set aside. You can actually target and have communities that are set aside for veterans. Right, you can say that you are serving just seniors. So there is precedent. There are, as we know, populations that can be directly served without having to do this dance of we're LGBT, like affirming housing, as opposed to no, there's there are potential set aside. So I think that's a conversation for community members to have. What is that desirable, and is that an advocacy push that could be taken on?
And John, just for clarity as well, could you speak a little bit to like Hopwa housing and how that also creates carve-outs for people living with HIV?
Yeah. I mean, there's been dedicated housing for that for a long time. We don't have direct experience with that, but we know folks who do. And so, I mean, so much of this, unfortunately, is tied to funding, and whether it's low-income housing tax credits or the entitlement money that cities, municipalities, that federal government, HUD receives in programs. This is all about political will, as always. And if there's enough pressure put on, and the right kind of pressure, then programs can be capitalized in order to serve communities that need it.
Awesome. Thank you, John and William, for stepping in there. This next question from an audience member, I absolutely love this question, is how can we create an interstate dialogue and exchange of resources as activists and housing providers across states? Is there a way that we can create actual meaningful dialogue across states? Ideally, I would love it if we could all advocate for more LIHTC credits, low-income housing tax credits nationally, or for example, to allow for more LGBTQ plus older adult federal support and legislation. So really asking about opportunities for interstate dialogue and crossover, which this is such a wonderful question and is so important.
There's always an opportunity to talk to one another. Someone just has to be responsible for facilitating the space, is my opinion. The Louisiana Trans Advocates is a part of the Equality Federation, which it's a national grouping, coalition, I guess, of statewide equality orgs across the country. And I think we have like 39 states involved. It's very helpful. I think everyone should have something like it, and I'm not aware of one that's specifically related to housing or even queer housing, but I think someone like Sage might be in a great place to at least try to pull people together to make it happen, or find the people that can.
Any other thoughts from folks on this? I see in the chat, Joe, that you have thoughts you could share as well. So yeah, any of our panelists or Joe, if y'all want to hop in, go for it.
So I just wanted to share that at a point in my past life, when I was running Children's Brain Tumor Foundation, there was an organization that I also ran called the North American Brain Tumor Coalition. It was a collection of organizations focused on pediatric and adult brain tumors, but the basic model was a collaborative model that people joined by choice that work together on common issues. It strikes me that SAGE could facilitate a national dialogue simply by being willing to provide a mechanism for people to speak together on a regular basis. In the case of the organization I ran, we actually had a day on Capitol Hill where we went up and talked to Congress people and senators about our common issues. It needn't take that particular focus, but it could certainly start as a way in which we could talk together by having simply a platform where we can do that.
And there are some national organizations that focus on housing. I know the National Alliance to End Homelessness, they have a component to address affordable housing, and different work groups that provide that focus on different populations. So I know there's that. There's also an affordable housing, a national affordable housing. I haven't seen anything that separately addresses the LGBTQ plus community, but I know that there is a affordable housing national affordable housing organization.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for this wonderful conversation. We do need to move on to close up for today, but I want to extend so much gratitude to you all for the amazing work that you're doing and just the time and energy you shared to put into this conversation on a Wednesday afternoon. We are so grateful for you being here. If you're comfortable and would like to share contact information for your organizations in the chat, feel free to do so. But this has just been so invaluable, and there's so much wonderful engagement in the chat. So I would encourage you all to look in there if you have the opportunity. But thank you all so much for being here and helping us close out this wonderful event. So to finish us off today for this event, I want to thank everyone who attended and participated in the chat. We hope that these conversations were nourishing and thought-provoking. And we just thank all who participated as organizers, partners, speakers, event planners, interpreters, captioners, panelists, everyone. It was just so incredible to see all the support that came around this exciting conversation. Before you all leave, I would like to share some information about SAGE's State of LGBTQ plus Aging survey. This survey is created to better understand the experiences and needs of LGBTQ plus older people in the United States. The findings of this survey will improve and inform SAGE's policy advocacy, our program offerings, and our strategic direction. Anyone who identifies as LGBTQ plus and is aged 50 or older residing in the United States can fill out this survey. So I'm going to put the link to this survey in the chat. Again, this survey is so important in just informing the work that we do and making sure that it is centered in the needs of LGBTQ plus older adults across the country. And I'll also add that if you share your email address on this survey, you will be entered into a raffle to win a $50 gift card. But here is the link in the chat for that survey. Feel free to share it with any friends or colleagues who also are a part of the community. And as we close the event, you will also be prompted to fill out a post-event survey. This is a separate survey from the one I just mentioned, but it is a short and sweet survey about your experience at this event today. These post-event surveys really help us understand how to create the best event for participants in the future. And so please if you have a chance, fill out the survey. We'll also be sending the survey out in an email to everyone who registered tomorrow. As I promised, I'm going to post my email in the chat here now as well. Feel free to reach out to me directly if you have any questions about the event or follow-up. And of course, if any of your questions didn't get answered today, please feel free to reach out to me via email. We want to make sure that you get all of the information that you need from this event. And if we had had all day to spend on this topic, I'm sure we would have. There's so much rich conversation points here. But of course, thank you everyone for being here, and a special thanks again to Tuttle Co. for your support on this event, and to the Harry and Jeanette Weinberg Foundation for their generous funding that made this event possible. Thank you all so much.